Did anyone ever have a family that was completely homogeneous and in which everyone behaved in ways we considered acceptable? No? There's always someone, isn't there? Eventually, however, most of us accept that these individual outliers are still family. And what about your chosen family? Are they all just like you? Probably not. When we choose our friends and community, some of whom we will eventually consider as family, chances are we naturally believe that they should be like us, and that our well-being will depend on that. But what if our personal growth actually depends on some of our chosen family to be very different from ourselves? When I was a kid, my mother used to make a point of inviting people to Sunday dinner at our house, people who were not at all like us. I remember one young man from Kenya who was studying at Princeton and whom a friend of ours recommended we befriend. We thought we would be hosting a lonely young boy. But to our surprise, it turned out he was a high-up official in his new government, and he was studying political science. He became a close friend, just as a young boy might have. Oh, good. My pages, I've got a missing page, oh well. Another person who was invited to our house was a young lady who had just aged out of the foster care system and whom we hoped would trust us to help navigate her path to adulthood. But she didn't know how to trust, and we lost touch. There were lots of different kinds of people who came through our doors. And at least for the day that they were there, they were family. As Forrest Gump said, life is like a box of chocolates. So are people. And you never know what you'll get. And it's always worth the experience. These people that we brought home enriched our lives. As an adult, I experienced a particularly enriching community, and the story goes like this. I'll teach you how to shoot pool if you'll teach me how to play the harp. She was serious. I pondered, which was the more lucrative skill? She used to be a national pool champion, but now lived in a not exactly first-rate campground called Hawkeye RV Park. You wouldn't want to mess with her. She was all attitude, and she probably had the muscle to back it up. At the time, I too lived in a motorhome at Hawkeye, where the rent was what I could afford. My neighbors were interesting. One very young woman lived in a tent with 3 barefoot children, even in the winter, and a kitten. There was an older, gruff-voiced person the adult women called Mom, with a sweet disposition who always looked like she'd just awakened from a really long sleep. Next door to my space was an ancient motorhome occupied by a drummer who practiced every afternoon to recordings of popular tunes from the 60s to the 80s. I had, through constant exposure, memorized all the lyrics, which wasn't exactly my first choice of skills. Most evenings, Hawkeye had a smoky ambiance, that whenever I opened my window flowed in and made me feel a bit happier than normal. Noisy parties went on at one space or another late into most nights. The phrase, "there goes the neighborhood," was probably never uttered there. Hawkeye RV Park was located in the otherwise upscale town of Sedona, Arizona, tucked away on a back street where tourists were unlikely to notice it, much like our own Caswell Brown Transitional Housing Encampment here in Port Townsend. Hawkeye, of the many places I've lived, was one of the few where people actually cared about and for each other, their neighbors, as best they could. They knew the meaning of the phrase, chosen family. They didn't have much, but what they had, they shared. However, their ability to support one another was limited by the fact that they were all in pretty much the same circumstance. For those who would have liked to live in a more secure situation, there was not a more fortunate branch of their family to help them get a foothold and step up out of the cycle of homelessness. Here and now, in Port Townsend, there are a number of people, more than we care to count, living in their cars, including a 92-year-old Korean War veteran. There's an extensive tent city in the woods. There's a lady, or probably more than one, sleeping on a bench at the pier. And folks at a transitional housing encampment are struggling to self-manage their community. When we were teenagers, if someone wanted to be included in whatever group we were part of, they had to conform to our way of dressing and speaking. They had to look and act the part, and if they didn't, they were shunned. Most adults have never really grown out of that way of thinking. We still think there's a them and an us. By the way, I'm aware that the politically correct term these days for living without permanent shelter is unhoused, but I'm choosing to use the term homeless because a home is so much more than just a house. A home is where you feel you belong. Many people who live different lives from the majority of us actually choose to do so. I've had some enlightening conversations with folks whose chosen homes are outdoors, eschewing the need to pay rent for living spaces that don't suit them, for needing the solitude of nature. They are at home outdoors. Being houseless is not necessarily being homeless when it's a preferred choice. That choice must be respected, and it's fine to live differently when it harms no one. Many others, however, did not choose it, do not have the skills for it, and do not feel at home outdoors. They're there by necessity. If we see somebody fall down, we stop to help them up and make sure they're not injured, right? I can tell you, the truly homeless have fallen, and they are injured. I've heard some among us say, we can't solve homelessness, it's too big an issue. But compassion toward even one person makes a difference for that person. When you have nothing, where can you go? Besides not having a place to sleep, you cannot access bathing or laundry facilities. And if you want to work, you can't look good for job interviews. And you're not often welcome in public buildings. People blame you for your situation. The fact is, everyone is doing the best they can with the tools they have. Better tools are needed when a job is lost, a devastating accident occurs, a house burns down, a teenager is kicked out of their home. Many circumstances can cause a person to become homeless and in crisis. And although we assume there are agencies to take care of people in these circumstances, the availability and capabilities of such aid agencies is far from adequate. Years ago, I lost my successful career and my home because my health failed. As a result, I found myself living at the aforementioned Hawkeye campground. At that time, I attended and was welcomed at the Interfaith Fellowship, a faith community not too different from Unitarian Universalism. I was included in their activities, sang in their choir, and was considered family. They didn't assume I was to blame for my circumstance. I made many lasting friendships, and with their simple acceptance, I was able to keep going and get back to living a productive life. What can we do specifically to reach out to those who need assistance and acceptance? Well, if we look outside the confines and the boundaries of these safe walls, we can find answers in the same places that produce the questions. I'll say that again. We can find answers in the same places that produce the questions. Where a person needs a hand to hold, hold it. Where a person needs a sandwich, buy it. Where a person needs a ride, offer it. Offer to do their laundry, and not just once. Check in with someone regularly. Get to know them. Where our town and county falter in providing in a practical and sustainable way, run for city council or county commissioner. Heaven knows we need it. Where education is needed, become a tutor. Where clothing is needed, look through your closet. Where housing is needed, help build it. Bring someone to church every week. Make and distribute bag lunches to folks you see on the street, not just once, but habitually. Make it who we are. Make them family. If it's not easy or comfortable to do these things, think about the sermons we've had here recently on transformation. It's never too late to transform ourselves into being people who reach out proactively when we see a need and which, like ripples on a pond, we can do in order to quietly transform our whole community. This can be an individual commitment or a group commitment. We have teams and councils here that do good work. But with an estimated number of up to 300 homeless people in the Port Townsend area, out of about 500 in Jefferson County, and that's a conservative estimate, so much more action is needed. And it takes all of us to do more. We as a congregation and as individuals can live up to our mission statement here at Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, which is to love, to share, to serve. Perhaps we should add to broaden our chosen family. We're really all in the same boat. Are you with me on this? May it be so.